I'm happy to be here and thrilled to see so many people again. So I am Kathy Salisbury. I am the director of the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University. And just by a show of thumbs up emojis, how many of you have been to the Arboretum recently? I recognize a bunch of names. Some of you have helped in our gardens as volunteers. And thank you very much for that. We have a robust volunteer group now at the Arboretum that keeps it looking beautiful. And so, oh, good. Well, I invite you, if you haven't been, I invite you to come and visit. And now, this time of the year, I'm biased. I like fall. It's one of my favorite seasons. And so I'm trying to put all of you in a place where it looks like I'm looking at you. Okay. So I invite you to come and visit the Arboretum in the fall. One of the reasons why it's pretty spectacular here, even with our smaller trees, as most of you know, a lot of our trees are newer since the 2021 tornado. And so we have planted more than almost 800 trees back into the Arboretum since the storm. And we have planted for a lot of interesting a lot of seasonal interest throughout the year. And if you think about it, we're a college campus and we teach tree and shrub identification and plant identification to students. And our semesters are such that having a lot of plants with winter interest and fall interest is important for the students for learning. And so, and if you remember too, the more diversity you have in the seasonal interest in your garden, so the more types of flowers you have, the longer the bloom time, the more interesting fall colors, that the more diversity you're supporting as far as wildlife goes too. So so I encourage you to come and visit the Arboretum. The fall color is surprisingly nice, despite the terrible lack of rain that we've had over this entire fall and part of the summer. So the colors are looking really gorgeous. And so I encourage you to come and visit. And so today I'm going to talk to you about something that a lot of people do as gardeners. They do a fall cleanup in the garden. They get their gardens ready for the winter, ready to go to bed. And so I would just want to talk to you about that, what that looks like, and how maybe we could rethink that practice and why we might want to rethink that practice. So, and then I'll try and talk about what's in the photos too. So in this picture that you see on this cover photo, this is our campus along Meeting House Road. Just behind this is our brand new nursery. We just opened a native plant nursery. So just on the just to the left of this photo, there's our new native plant nursery is in there. But what you see here is a row of trees. These are our they're red maples. And you can see that there's leaves underneath them, right? So in this time of the year, we start thinking about cleaning up leaves and then plants going dormant, right? And so we have a lot of fall interest in the garden. And so one thing I want to encourage you to do is really take a walk around and look at all of the interesting things that are going on this time of the year. And remember that the reason why there's fruits and flowers this time of the year is because they're supporting some kind of wildlife. So we have things like our perennials that are in seed now, which can feed animals. We have trees and shrubs that are in fruit now, some things that are even in flower this time of the year. Oops, I must have this on a timer. So so you can just see what we have here. So one of the questions I want to ask you is, if you do a fall cleanup, why are you doing this fall cleanup? Why is it that you have decided that this is a task that needs to be done and needs to be done now? And what are the tasks that you're doing? So in general, fall cleanups include cleaning up the leaves, cutting back perennials, maybe doing some fertilization, taking care of the lawn, doing maybe some pruning of trees and shrubs, that just tidying up for the fall. And in general, when I've asked people in the past why they are doing this, a lot of it goes back to, well, it's just what's done. This is what the neighbors are doing, and I don't want to be the neighbor that is standing out. This is just the way we take care of things where I live and in the neighborhood where I live. That happens a lot. And also you'll find garden centers or nurseries, big box stores telling you this is the time of year to do this. You'll find landscaping companies telling you this is the time of the year to do these particular things. And I just want to get out of that thinking and really understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we might be able to do it different. So I was always that neighbor. For those of you who know me, you're probably not shocked. I was the neighbor who would have the more rambunctious gardens in where I was living, and the gardens and yards on either side of me would be very tidy, and mine would just be raucous with flowers and leaves and all kinds of you know things that make your neighbors look sideways at you and roll their eyes. But that is the way I operated. A little bit out of ecological principles and a bit out of sometimes having other things I'd rather be doing. So we're going to start off talking about leaves because that's what happens in the fall. The leaves fall. We're very lucky in this area that we have one of the most significant, colorful, diverse fall displays of any place in the world. There's only a handful of other places on the entire planet that have the beauty that we have, the diversity that we have in fall leaves and the color we get and the duration of the fall colors. So we're really lucky to have all that. But of course, after the display is done, the leaves are on the ground and we feel we have to do something with them depending on what else is going on in our landscape. And so I just want to give you an idea of our leaves and what actually is going on in our leaves. And I'll give you a little bit of context just of myself. I live in the middle of the woods. I live in the woods. There's big trees on all sides of me. My whole understory is giant boulders. I have a tiny little lawn space that I'm failing miserably at keeping going well because I am in the woods and it's stilt grass keeps coming into it. But I have I have a very long driveway and I have a lot of leaves I have to deal with on a regular basis, starting about 2 weeks ago and going through until all the leaves have fallen. So this is something I think about a lot, what I can do with these a lot. But so I'm learning also and seeing all of this firsthand. So when you're taking a look at your leaves or thinking about your leaves, I think it's important to note that there's a lot of animals that use these fallen leaves as habitat. So when we're cleaning them up, we're actually removing habitat from our yards. So things like this is a gray tree frog. I had these in my yard. I accidentally moved one inside my house on a house plant that lived outside all summer. And when I moved it in to protect it from the frost, it was next to, it had the wood stove going. It's nice and warm inside my house. And all of a sudden I hear tree frogs peeping inside my house. And it was one of these guys. So gray tree frog, they overwinter in the leaf litter as adults. So they need it. Wood frogs, also, you might hear them croaking in the early spring when they're trying to find a mate. They're very distinctive. They are near wetter areas and you'll hear them croaking, but these guys overwinter in leaf litter as well. Salamanders, like this four-toed salamander, overwinters in the leaf litter. So these guys, I see salamanders all the time on my property, and they're a sign of environmental health and ecological health in a location, and they need the leaf litter for survival. And then there's insects that also overwinter. So this is a goldenrod soldier beetle. And the beetle doesn't overwinter as an adult, but the eggs are deposited and then protected by the leaf litter. And then the larvae hatch and hang out in the leaf litter also for this goldenrod soldier beetle. And you might think, well, who cares about a goldenrod soldier beetle? What difference does it make? But those eggs and the larvae provide food for spiders and beetles. So it's not just that we're protecting these insects themselves, but we're protecting a food source for other insects. It's a web. Remember, it's a food web. And so leaving the leaves helps us maintain threads of that food web. an inspection of your leaf pile. Sometimes I wonder if I should show people these things because maybe they don't want these critters all over their yard, or don't want people, they'd rather not know what's hanging out in their leaves. But in your leaf pile, you may find a black damsel bug. The adults of these guys overwinter in the leaf litter. And believe it or not, they're beneficial insects. So they actually eat, they have a voracious appetite, and they eat aphids, they eat true bugs, they eat spider mites, they eat small caterpillars. So they are beneficial insects. So if you're cleaning your leaves up, you might actually be removing helpers from your garden that help keep pest populations down in your space. The hummingbird clearwing moth, when I first learned about this or first saw it, and was more interested in what the nature was around me, somebody called it the flying lobster, but this is the hummingbird clearwing moth. It is a type of sphinx moth, and it's a daytime flying moth. So you'll see it out and about during the day. Some people call it a hummingbird moth because it looks like a hummingbird going flower to flower. Many of us are familiar with this one. Many of us see it. It is a pollinator of many native plants. The caterpillars feed on native shrubs like viburnums, providing food for birds as they're rearing their young, right? So the birds eat the caterpillars to feed the babies. And the pupa of hummingbird clearwing moths overwinter in a cocoon in the leaf litter. I'm a plant nerd. I'm also an amateur novice beginner moth nerd, big fan of moths. So I'm really interested in how I can protect them and make sure that they can thrive. So maybe this isn't the best picture to show people of reasons to think differently about doing a fall cleanup. This is a thin-legged wolf spider. It's a non-web forming ground dwelling spider. And these guys they live in the leaf litter. They overwinter in the leaf litter. They also find and eat insects in the leaf litter because they have to catch them. They're not spinning webs and catching them passively that way. And all bumblebees that we see. So a lot of us are familiar with the non-native European honeybees, and that they go into hives and overwinter there. But bumblebees, and we have a number of species of native bees, hundreds of different species of native bees, and many of them are ground dwelling and solitary. And all bumblebees die except for mated queens. The rest of them die in the winter. But the mated queens hibernate in the leaf litter or in abandoned rodent holes. So this is how we maintain our bee population. If we want to have healthier pollinator populations, leaving the leaf litter can help with that as well. There's, North America has more than 3,500 species of native bees, and most of them need a place to spend the winter that's protected from cold and from predators. They might hunker down in a piece of peeling tree bark. They may stay tucked away in the hollows of stems, like you see here from the sedum. Some spend their winter as eggs. Some are larvae that burrow into the ground, and all of them are important pollinators. And so when we remove every last bit of debris from our garden in the fall, we're taking away a lot of those overwintering spaces. And so what I'm hoping today to show you is how we can think differently about a fall cleanup, from the timing of it to, if you really want to do cleanup in the fall, how you might still provide space for these animals that call your garden home. So here, I'm going to just cover a couple other creatures that overwinter in your garden and that you will start to see this time of the year. And if you're raking the debris or cleaning up your gardens, you may see things like this in your gardens. So we're going to start with the woolly bear caterpillar. Many of you know this guy. People pick them up, and super fuzzy. And, there's an old wives' tale about how the width of their brown bands can predict how terrible or how mild the winter is going to be. There's obviously somebody's researched this, and there's no correlation between the band size and the weather that happens, but people still like to think that way. And I think it was the I don't remember. The longer the black bands are, the longer, colder, snowier, and more severe the winter would be. So that's that's if you were trying to see if it works, that's what you're looking for. This is a caterpillar, so it's a larva of a moth or a butterfly. And in this case, it is this eventually turns into the Isabella tiger moth. And you start to see these caterpillars around this time of the year in the fall. You'll see them crossing roads, trying to get someplace, and you'll see them a lot. And what they're trying to do is get to the leaf litter. They overwinter in the leaf litter. They're one of the first caterpillars to emerge in the spring. And so at this time of the year, they're heading towards their overwintering locations. And so we look for, this is the woolly bear chrysalis, or the cocoon, right, of the woolly bear. And so you can see how this would be easily raked up and disposed of. It doesn't look like much at all. In fact, it might look like something that was left behind by an animal, instead of created by it. And then it turns into this. This is the Isabella tiger moth. I call moths the butterflies of the night. And I think they're so pretty, and there's such diversity out there. But this is what the woolly bears turn into. So another one that we want to protect, that we probably love and don't realize is so connected to our leaf pile, are Luna moths. This is a Luna moth caterpillar. It lays its eggs on sweet gum leaves. And sweet gum is a native tree. People love it. Great fall color. People don't love the spiky fruits that it gets, but maybe you'll change your mind after you see this caterpillar that's associated with it. After it lays its eggs on the leaves, the caterpillar eats the leaves. Oh, I'm sorry. It lays its eggs. When the caterpillar emerges, the caterpillar eats the leaves until it becomes full size. Then the caterpillar wraps a leaf around itself, silks it shut, creating a little cocoon or a sleeping bag for the caterpillar, and then the pupa is inside there. It does not silk the leaf that it's enclosed itself in to the tree. So when the leaves fall in the fall, this little sleeping bag with a caterpillar in it falls to the ground with the rest of the leaves, with the pupa inside. So it overwinters. The caterpillar overwinters in the leaves, and safely winters in the accumulated leaf duff down below the trees. And then, of course, it emerges as this beautiful Luna moth, which only lives a day or two, has no feeding parts, because its only purpose is to mate at this point. If anybody's been lucky enough to have one of these in their landscape, I've had them on my door handle. I come home and there's this giant green moth on the door. It's really exciting to see, and it's brilliant. You just can't believe that, there's something this beautiful flying around in the night around you. And so if we clean up all our leaves, we lose our Luna moths. And of course, you all probably know that our insect populations are dwindling significantly. There's less bugs on our windshields, and the population is severely declining, and part of that is because of our landscape management practices. Not all of it by any means, but a lot of us aren't doing anything to help insect populations in the way that we manage our landscapes. So here we have a different type of chrysalis. This is a butterfly. This is the morning cloak butterfly chrysalis. They're some of the first to emerge in the spring because they overwinter in the leaf litter or behind bark as adults. So these are hanging on in the spring, and then they become, but you can see this is on a dormant piece of plant material, and they look just sort of like old leaves if you don't look closely at their chrysalis. And then if you got rid of that, you wouldn't have this morning cloak butterfly. Morning cloaks, you see them, they're the first butterflies you see in the spring, and they overwinter in the leaf litter or behind bark, like shagbark, hickory, or other exfoliating bark plants as adults. And here you see on the leaf litter right here, this is the chrysalis of the fritillaries, and fritillaries have an association with violets. So the violets are the host plants for fritillaries, and you can see this is the chrysalis for a fritillary right there underneath the violet. great spangled fritillaries overwinter as caterpillars and leaf litter. And so it's really important to remember that our gardens are more than just decoration, that they're part of a system, and the way we manage it can help support that system. So just this morning, I was scrolling through Instagram and I found if you need another reason to consider leaving the leaves, or that you can convince other people to leave leaves, I found this Homegrown National Park, which is an initiative to have as many people as possible start treating their yards like a park or like a national park, and having all these individual yards lumped together to consider as a national park. And so taking care of them with sustainability and ecology in mind. And I found this post, and I'm going to go through the pages in the post, but there's a relatively new research that's been done, and a report that's just been published, an article that's just been published by researchers at the University of Maryland, who have found that the years of removing leaves from the soil health has shown that the soil does not absorb as much carbon as it could if you leave the leaves there. And so basically, if you leave the leaves, you're helping the soil to absorb more carbon. And of course, we know that carbon is one of the main contributors to the climate change and the global climate change. So the more that we can sequester carbon in our yards, the better for the environment. And by leaving the leaves, we actually can sequester more carbon, and the soil can sequester more carbon over time than if we were removing the leaves. So basically, it's the article showed that removing the leaves over time for years and years slows decomposition rates of the soil. So whatever is there to be decomposed doesn't decompose as fast. And then it reduces soil carbon rates in suburban yards. And that if you leave the leaves and you don't remove them, and you haven't removed them, the soil holds up to 32% more carbon on average. That's a third more carbon than if you take the leaves. And that's significant. And as it says here, that if you left the leaves, including the grass that decomposes, instead of taking up your grass clippings, it would make a significant difference if we all decided to make this change in carbon storage. So that would help with climate change, as well as improving soil quality and making it more making it better able to absorb water during storms and that kind of thing. It also said, and I'm going to talk about this too, that of course, we have yards for a reason. We have lawns for a reason. We need open green grass for a reason, whether that's for pets or kids or just you. The reason why I planted my yard, my tiny little lawn in the shade, was it was a COVID project. I just wanted to go outside and read on a really perfect, nice piece of grass. Never happened. I haven't figured it out yet, but that was my goal, and I wanted to maintain that little space of grass. But if you can think about your lawn as an area rug instead of wall-to-wall carpet, you could be helping with carbon storage in your yard, as well as all these critters that find this place home. And your yards, can take the carbon out of the environment and lock it in place so it doesn't become carbon dioxide. That's what carbon sequestering is. And so by leaving the leaves, you actually can help with that, which there's not a lot of ways that we as people can help with that. We can help stop putting carbon into the air, but helping to sequester it is a little more challenging. And this is one way that we can actually do it, that we can contribute to that. So I understand, and again, we're going to talk about this, that on your yard, your lawn, you might not want to leave the leaves, and it might not be good for your lawn, but you can pile leaves in other places, and take a look around your yard and say, where can I have leaves, and let them just be, right? And so there's just another push for leaving your leaves, or thinking about how you might leave your leaves. And then your soil is actually better able to perform really important ecosystem functions, right? And so there's a reason to think differently about a fall cleanup. Here at the Arboretum, of course, we don't leave leaves on the lawn. And so there's options, right? If you have to clean up, preferably you rake or blow the leaves to a location where you keep them intact and just let them decompose naturally in a space. Second best option, this is not great for overwintering anything in the leaves, but in this case, nothing's overwintering in these leaves on the grass right now. There's not enough there. It's not protected enough. You might get, if there's sweet gums in there, you might chop up some caterpillars or something. So it's not perfect. But here is using a mulching mower. And you can see in the lines left that this mulching mower is chopping up the leaves very small and putting them back down into the soil. So leaving them as fertilizer, natural fertilizer in your lawn is something that you could consider doing. You could also bag them and then take them to it as mulch. It chops them up and it bags them, and you could take that and then leave them, add it into the woods or some natural space that you have in your yard to decompose or provide habitat for spiders and insects and that kind of thing. Leaf mulch is really excellent for your landscape. So we use this a lot. The township, Upper Dublin Township, has leaf mulch available sometimes. And so we've used this in the past. In fact, after the storm, we had contractors in here cleaning up for us, and they did such a good job cleaning up that they actually cleaned up down to soil. And so we lost in some spaces a lot of that really good organic matter and material that had been accumulating from almost 100 years of trees dropping leaves and the leaves being left there. And so we've been reestablishing this leaf litter by introducing leaf mulch into the area, because in some spaces we don't have the trees yet to put the leaf litter back. So we've been mulching with leaves in a lot of cases. And again, this is really great. So it's really great for your soil, improves in all kinds of ways. The organic matter, it works, help to neutralize pH if you have a pH issue, drainage issue, if it drains too fast or it drains too slow. Adding leaf mulch can help with both of these things in your gardens. It works like mulch does. And if you have a lot of leaves, it's free mulch. So instead of putting hardwood mulch in your gardens, consider using leaf mulch instead. If you know you're going to have leaves, just mulch in the fall. You can do that. So we do that here. There's also options for composting. So if you're a composter, if you have compost in your backyard, I have a backyard compost pile. And during the growing season, most of your materials are green, fresh, high in moisture and nitrogen. And if you're a composter, you need a balance of browns and greens. And greens, if their balance is off and you have too many greens, which is what you have during the growing season, it can get smelly. It will be slow to decompose. It just doesn't work right. So you need these browns, this carbon, to help it function, to help your compost pile function better. So you get better decomposition, you can get faster decomposition, and it's healthier amendment for your landscape. But we don't have a lot of browns during the rest of the growing season. I have a chicken coop, and so I have the pine chips from the chicken coop that I put in there. But I also stockpile leaves back there so that during the growing season, you can kind of throw in some browns as you're putting all your vegetable scraps and your weeds that you're pulling out of the garden and that kind of thing in there, so that you get that nice balance of browns and greens. So you can think of them as stockpiling. And when you're using them that way, they're still providing habitat for these insects and other animals. And so we also want to think about cutting back our gardens. And this is a really tough one for people, because we have been conditioned that if we have a garden, we should be cutting back everything in the fall. And that's just not necessarily true. If we don't need to cut everything back in the fall, we can cut it back in the spring. And I spoke to you about these insects that overwinter in these stems and stalks. And generally, they're overwintering. And when the temperature starts getting above 50 degrees and you start to see, like on the maple trees, the buds starting to swell, that's a good indicator that the insects have probably hatched and are out of their overwintering place. They're probably on the move now, and then you can cut the plant material back. But really, we should leave up fall displays and fall seed heads. The seed heads feed the birds. If we clean up, we're removing habitat and safe space for animals that overwinter. Think of rabbits and chipmunks and things like that. So we want to reconsider that. Of course, here is a swallowtail on an echinacea, right? And the echinacea seed heads, we know through the winter they provide food for birds. This is a tiger swallowtail overwintering as a chrysalis on standing plant material. So this is really important too. Look at it, looks like an old dried up leaf, right? There's that little piece of silk holding it on there. This is the future swallowtail butterfly. And if we clean up all of our landscape plants, we're removing these from our landscapes. And so this is really important. In the Arboretum, we actually leave our perennial gardens up, and we only clean up if they start to fall over and go into the pathways, then we'll cut those stems. But generally we leave everything, and then we'll clean it up in the early spring so that we give this place for habitat for these insects and animals. So when we're talking about cutting back perennials, cutting them, a lot of times this time of the year, people are cutting them back to the ground as soon as the mums and the pansies start to go in. You can see here, this is the echinacea. These are the seed heads of the purple coneflower. If we had deadheaded these, we would have extended blooms throughout the summer and into the fall. And then at that last flush of flowers, you leave them go. And then there's seed heads that provide food for birds and other wildlife into the winter, not all the way through the winter, but into the winter. And so that's really important. And if we cut these all back, we lose that. So hopefully, instead of doing this cut back, we can grow to appreciate. I like the way fall. If you know me by now, I'm a big plant nerd, and plants really can't do anything wrong. And I like the fall color. I like the change in the seasons and the evidence of the change in the seasons. I like I have a blog that I keep, and in one time I described it as the spiky architecture of dormancy. And I love it. I think it adds something dynamic to the gardens. And here you can see a goldfinch, sitting on top of this, eating the seeds from this purple coneflower. Now, what should you clean up and what should you focus on in a fall garden? You can focus on diseased plants or plants infested with insects. You want to get rid of those. A great source of inoculation for the next year's garden is this year's diseased leaves. So if they're falling to the ground, or if you have them in the garden, you want to cut them out, and you don't want to compost them unless you have a really hot compost pile. Generally people don't, so you want to get rid of those maybe to the township that has a hot compost pile and can handle this stuff. But you want to get rid of those, throw them away, or compost them, and get them out of the garden. So anything that's insect infested or disease infested, that is a good thing to do. A lot of times this time of the year, the plants are perfectly healthy, but the leaves start to get leaf spot and foliar blotches, and those are ones that you could rake up and get out of there, because if you leave them there, that's just inoculant for the same thing for next year. So usually they're just aesthetic. They're not causing problems to the plant, but if you don't like those aesthetics, you can get rid of them help to get rid of them that way. So of course, I think, in addition to food, there's ornament left in these plants, even through the winter time. So maybe shifting or starting to appreciate this dormancy and how it looks, and how this is an evidence of a change of seasons. Now, some people, I'm related to some, hate winter, hate any evidence of winter, get really sad when everything's dormant and nothing's green. And so I'm doing another talk this winter about plants that flower in the winter time, so that you can have hopefully get out in the garden and not be so sad about winter. But there's a beauty to this dormancy, I think, that we can appreciate. And just knowing that lots of animals are living in there still, even though it's so dormant, I think maybe might give people hope. Okay, so I'm just going to check the chat. Oh, I am going to get to containers. So I saw that question. All right. So speaking of cutting back, many people want to take to pruning in the fall. And generally, as a rule, you do not want to prune shrubs, trees, or herbaceous plants in the fall. The reason why is that it encourages fleshy growth because it's still warm and the plant is still relatively active. It encourages fleshy growth right before frost and freezing happens, which is a terrible idea because that new tender growth will get killed or severely damaged by the cold. And so really all you want to do is prune for safety or prune out diseased and dead or dangerous wood at this time of the year. You should not be pruning anything really this time of the year. So if you're thinking about doing this time of year, wait till the plant's completely dormant in the winter and then prune it. That's all you need to do, is just wait until then. And then anything you know that flowers in the spring, you should be pruning immediately after it's finished flowering. So nothing should be pruned this time of the year. So for pruning wise, if you're dealing with flowering shrubs and you're wondering, okay, if I don't prune it now, when do I prune it? A lot of people who prune shrubs now, they end up pruning off all the flower buds, and that defeats the purpose of having a flowering shrub. It has already set buds for the following year, and you go in and prune it now and they're gone. Or you're getting it to push new growth at a time where it's very susceptible to damage. So if a flowering shrub is spring blooming, they bloom on old wood, so that's wood that has grown for a season, and they need to be pruned immediately after flowering. And if it's a summer flowering shrub, similar to this hydrangea, they bloom on new wood, which means it's the current season's wood. And for that reason, it's best to prune those shrubs very late in the winter or early spring. And those are the only two times of the year that you're pruning, is right after it's done blooming or when it's dormant in the late winter into the very early spring. You don't prune things in the fall. And if you want to do something in your yard in the fall, or to help protect your trees, spend the time, instead of pruning, protecting them from buck rub in the winter. This is something we have hundreds of cages around our trees for protecting them from buck rub. This is a temporary protection of young trees and shrubs. And basically it's from September through November, although we noticed buck rubbing starting in late August on our campus. We noticed that it started when the students started and back to school for the school year and for the fall, and that is in August. And so we start caging our trees for buck rub at the beginning of August now. And then we leave them up into February, even though that's way beyond when you need it. Basically, this is a way for them to mark their territory, and anything that is 6 inches or less diameter, any tree that's 6 inches or less diameter in this area needs to be protected from buck rub. We've lost a number of trees due to buck rub. That's why we protect them. They will kill a tree. And they've done experiments where they stick posts in the ground, a 6-inch post in the ground, to see if they'll go to that instead, and they won't. They prefer, trees. So that's a task that you could do late summer or early fall. And then there are fall lawn renovation is something else that can be done. Now is a great time, although this particular fall hasn't been that spectacular because of the lack of rain. Fall is a time that people do lawn renovations. Again, thinking of your lawn as an area rug and not wall-to-wall carpet, you can spruce it up in the spots that you want to. It should happen in early fall, everything finished by right around now or by Halloween at the latest. If it is mild, and of course our seasons are getting longer, our mild seasons are getting longer because of our changing climate, you can get away with later, so through till Halloween. So there's still time now. I've been told we have a turf guru on campus here, and I've been told that we could go later into the season. But generally when the leaves start to fall, plants are going dormant and it's too late to begin. But it's pretty mild. There's still a lot of green out there. So you're okay. So the steps in that, if you are interested in doing some fall lawn care, identify why the lawn is struggling in the first place, try to take care of that problem, figure out, what's going on. Maybe you need to soil test. Maybe you need to figure out if it's the wrong type of grass you're using. You can add an amendment, so a very thin layer of compost to the entire area, organic matter, improves soil structure. Just like we were talking about why you would want to leave the leaves, adding compost will do that for your lawn. It also enhances the microorganisms that keep your soil and plants healthy. So you need less inputs. And then you could, put on organic fertilizers, slow release over time. That will help improve the soils. You can do a weed control, and for that will start when the very early spring weeds won't germinate. It's a preventative measure that keeps them from germinating. So you can do that at this time of the year as well. And it's there for in the spring. Right. You could also consider adding microclover or something like that to your lawn to make it more sustainable. So here, microclover is a lawn mix or an amendment to a lawn that you can put in where the clover actually helps fix the nitrogen in the soil, putting nitrogen back that all the grass has taken out. And it also, of course, is a great plant for pollinators. So you can take the opportunity if you have gaps in your lawn to maybe fill it up with clovers or something like that, rather than you can make it more diverse rather than just having a monoculture of non-native, closely cropped grass plants. Containers. So if you have containers out there, it is possible to overwinter perennials in containers. And in order to do this, you need to plan from the beginning before you even plant your containers. And so generally you want to overwinter perennials. You want to buy perennials that are hardy at least 2 zones colder than where we are. So if we're 7B, you want to make sure that these plants are hardy into at least zone 5, and then plant them in the containers. You want to use large containers because the more soil mass that's around them, the more protected they are from the freezing and thawing. What kills plants in containers is thawing out and then freezing again, and then thawing out and freezing again. It ruptures the cells of the plants, and that's what kills them. The roots. And so the more mass you have around them, the more protected they are from that freezing and thawing. And so you can huddle up containers, these larger containers, you can huddle them up closer together. That helps insulate them. You can dig them in places where I've worked before, and in my own house, I've dug holes for containers and plopped them in the ground, and you could just leave them that way. The soil around them helps mitigate that freeze thaw cycle. You can use bags of leaves around them or hay bales around them to protect them, to insulate them as well. Or you can bring them into a shed or a garage you don't want it to be heated because you don't want to encourage ongoing growth. You want these to be dormant. So an unheated shed or garage. But remember, they're still respiring, so they will need water if you bring them inside. Even though they look dormant, you do need to water them. It's basically the protection from the freeze thaw cycle that you're most worried about when it comes to fall in the garden. You protect them that way. Annuals. So weeding is something that could be done this type of year, but you really want to focus on if they've already gone to seed. If they're an annual and they've already gone to seed, it's really too late. The winter's going to kill them anyway, so there's not really a need to focus on that. You can remove the weeds, or you can just deadhead them so they're not spreading any more weed seeds around. There's definitely a lot of weeds in the fall that come up or become exposed as other plants lose their leaves. So now's a great time to do a cleanup in that way to get rid of your weeds and either put leaf mulch down or fill in those gaps with desirable plants at this time of the year. If you have bare space in your lawn, in your garden, in your vegetable garden, or in your ornamental garden, you want to cover that bare space up. That soil can become compacted from snow or from rain falling on it. It also is susceptible to erosion if it's not covered. So if you don't have mulch on it, you can plant. This is a winter cover crop mix that eventually can be tilled in. If you have a vegetable garden, it can be tilled in as green manure. And so this is a choice for fall planting. And fall planting is usually late summer into early fall. And this provides winter erosion control. And then, like I said, you just till it in or turn it in, and it decomposes and adds organic matter to your soil. So, and this, if you have bare soil and you want to think about this, these are annuals, so they won't be a problem. And they they don't allow place for weeds to grow. And then of course, keep your soil on site and keep it from becoming compacted while you're trying to figure out what to do with this space. So highly recommend that. Another great thing to do this time of the year before the ground is frozen, if you want to keep yourself busy in the garden and now you're not going to, rake leaves or cut back everything, is to do a soil test. They say you should do a soil test every 3 years in your garden. If you haven't done one, it costs $9 from the extension, Penn State Extension, and every county has an extension where you can pick up these soil sample bags. Gives you instructions, you fill out a survey telling them what you're hoping to grow or do with this space, and they send you back the results of macro and micronutrients and recommendations for how to manage your soil based on what you said you were trying to do in it. And if you don't have any soil test at all from your property, the spending the $9 for a good baseline that tells you what's going on your property is really helpful. And it's a really good thing to have. And people usually think about doing soil tests in the spring. So the labs get a lot, especially from landscapers, the labs are getting a lot of samples in. And if you wait until now, there's not as much going on. People aren't thinking about soil testing. So your results might come back faster because they're not as busy this time of the year. And there's 2 types of soil tests that you can do. You can do a representative sample where you take a trowel full of soil from all the different areas of your yard, mix them all together, dry it out, and then take a sample of that and put it in the bag to send away for analysis. Or you can take a specific sample, say, I just know I want to have a vegetable garden here. I want to make sure there's nothing funny going on here. You take that trowel's worth and send that and tell them that you're trying to grow a vegetable garden there. So, and the reason why you do it every 3 years is because over time of adding amendments or mulch or changing the soil using water, you might change it. And so you want to get an idea of what's going on. And so for me, it's one of the best $9 that you could spend. If you were concerned about heavy metals, say you live in an old house and it used lead paint that chipped off into the ground around the outside of the house, you can take samples for that and you can pay extra to get a heavy metals test, something like that. So, so it's just a great resource, underused. Everybody should do a soil sample. So you can spend time in your fall garden doing that. Also, dividing spring flowering plants. Now is a great time to do that. So while instead of cutting everything back, anything that flowered in the spring, here's an example of Tiarella. This is a ground cover, but if you wanted to divide this up and move it around, now is a great time to do that because then it's where it needs to be when it's going to really start growing in the spring. So, so you can consider doing that, moving those around. And there's, in addition to leaves, you often get a bunch of sticks. And oh my gosh, we had that wind on Monday. That was just wacky wind on Monday, and this tree that was dead in my woods, it's a skinny tree, it's like this big, fell on the chicken coop. Chickens are fine, chicken coop is fine. It's Fort Chicks, very sturdy to keep out all the critters, and kept out this tree too. But this reminds me, you can make piles discreetly if you want, if that's your aesthetic, that are habitats also for wildlife. And so these brush piles, a garden brush pile, provides cover and habitat and winter protection, and also year-round protection for birds that are residents here, for the frogs that we were talking about, other mammals. It's really important. And when you walk around in the woods and are, if you go hiking, these happen naturally, right? But in our gardens, we tend to be very tidy. So if we are less tidy, we will have more diversity in our landscape. And of course, there's late season veggies. So it's too late this year to put in late season veggies, but if you plant plan to plant in August, or the sort of the middle of August into early September, you can sow crops for fall vegetables and get a fall vegetable crop. And a lot of those cold crops, so you can see cabbages, Brussels sprouts, lettuce. You can even do a fall crop of peas. The light is lower, so there's less light, so some things take longer than they would when you're sowing them in the spring, but you can certainly plant plants. And then there's a number of places now that are starting to sell fall available starters, like 6 packs of fall vegetables for you, so you can plant those as well. And so you can plant seeds now for spring emergence also. So things like carrots and peas, so you can do those, and they'll emerge in the spring. So you can get out there and do that. And then so you're pre-seeding your vegetable patch, and it lets nature decide when the time is right for spring emergence and when it's time to sprout. So the vegetables won't sprout while it's too cold for them to germinate. And so a lot of times we'll go out there and we'll plant them when we think it's right. But if you pre-seed things and protect it, then it's just going to emerge when the time is right. And continually frozen soil over the winter is better for the seeds than a cycle of freezing and defrosting that we might get if we plant them out too early in the spring. But you will get some loss. That does happen. Alliums, any of the alliums, kale, collards, cabbage, carrots, they're all wonderful plants to do this with. And of course, some veggies don't need any protection. Here you see leaf mulch around some kale plants, and people use food crops in their ornamental gardens a lot. And it's good to know that they can be mulched just like our ornamental crops are. So you can combine them very easily. Something else you can do in the fall garden, you can do seed collecting. And so this is the sweet gum seed pod. Here you can see all these individual little capsules with seeds in them. Somebody I knew from the Native Plant Society in New Jersey called these a Blue Jay's lunchbox. And that's what she called them to me. And I've always thought about them that way ever since, because people hate this fruit. And but this is a very important bird food source, or an important bird food source. So you can go out and start collecting seeds. And if you're trying to propagate them, you want to replicate the natural cycle in a lot of cases. And for these plants, they put these seeds out, and they need to go through a winter to break dormancy. They need to be cold and wet for a certain amount of time to break the dormancy of the seed. And so the easiest thing to do is to take these seeds, put them in a pot, and then just leave them outside. I've propagated hundreds of pawpaws that way. I just put them in pots and leave them outside and let it decide when nature's right and it's ready to grow. Of course, harvesting seeds depends on ripening and availability, but you can collect them, hold them in a cool, dark place until you're ready to plant them. And there's so many this time of the year to collect, and it's really cool. I just did a talk on the fruits of fall, and there's just so many different types of fruits, different types of seeds you can collect, and different methods to grow them. So if you're into plants and want to try growing your own, now is the time to go out there and start collecting them. And that could keep you busy through the winter. If you're kind of bummed, you could start sowing them and doing the research on how to grow them. And that gives you something else to do too. And then, of course, fall is the time for planting and transplanting. And so fall is the first best time to plant. Spring is the second best time. And the reason for that is because when you plant in the fall, the next season is winter. So there's dormant time. Then it's spring when it's rainy. It's getting everything it needs and the plant's in place. And then it has established roots and it's been toughened up so that when our summer comes, which are usually hot and dry, it's better able to withstand that. Where if you plant in the spring, the very next thing it has to deal with is summer. So for us in our region, fall planting is the best time for planting. You might have heard of that some plants are fall dig hazards. And so those are and so you might wonder what that means. And basically that means that if the plant is not already out of the ground to buy it, like at a nursery, you do not want to dig these in the fall. They don't have good transplant rates if you dig them in the fall for some reason. And so you want to only plant these. It's not that you can't plant these types of plants in the fall. It's that they need to be in containers or already dug and above ground. You do not want to mess with their root systems in the fall. And these are like oaks, maples, tulip trees, magnolias. They're just difficult to transplant in general. And then in the fall, it's just even worse. So that's something to keep in mind. But generally, fall is for planting, and you want to do that. Let's see. I will get to your questions. Good questions. Okay. So avoid planting things like sweet bay magnolias, birch, and hemlocks in the fall. They're slow growing and they don't establish roots before winter freezing. And so that can provide problems with them, that the tender roots will be affected, and they're more affected by that than other plants are. So those are better planted in the spring. But in general, fall is the best time for planting. And there's a lot of life in the winter garden, and what we do in the fall can help determine what's the life in our spring garden, and then the life in our garden in general. And not only that, but if we're leaving the leaves, we can help with storing carbon and mitigating the challenges of the changing climate that we're experiencing. So with that, I'm going to answer the questions I see, which are, what about plants in pots? Should we leave our spring, summer plants in the containers for bugs? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but you can leave the plants in containers. Oh, you mean not cutting them back so that there's something there. If you have other plants in the garden that can do that, that's fine. You don't have to leave your containers. And you want to make sure that your containers are tolerant of winter conditions. You want to make sure if you're leaving them outside that they are suitable for that freeze thaw cycle. There are frost-free containers out there. If you do not have a frost-free container, you want to make sure you take the plants out and bring it in. If it's ceramic or terracotta, because they're porous and moisture can get in, and then that will break the pot. But if they are frost-free, you can leave them out. My thoughts on wood chips as compost or mulch. That's fine. There used to be a saying out there, a belief that if you put wood chips on the soil, that it would lock up the nitrogen on top of the soil. But what they found is actually if you mix the wood chips into the soil, as it decomposes, it might lock up some of the nitrogen available to plants. But if you use it as a mulch, it doesn't damage the soil at all, and it's fine to use as a mulch. And then your iris bulbs or daylily bulbs, should you be doing anything with those at this time of the year? No, you don't. I didn't talk about non-hardy bulbs, so things like gladiola, canna lilies, those types of plants that you need to dig up and store. I should probably add that to this, but to store this time of the year. But anything that's hardy, there's not really anything you need to do unless you're planting new ones. There's nothing really that you need to do. If you wanted to, if your iris rhizomes are getting too crowded, you can definitely dig them up and divide them, but I would do that after they're done blooming and not this time of the year. That's in my experience, that's what I've done. So, all right. So thank you everybody for joining us, and hopefully I'll see you this winter.